Hey there, and welcome to Connect the Dots Learning Center podcast. I'm Stephanie Wagers, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're a seasoned therapist, clinic owner, or just starting out, this podcast is your go to spot for insights, tips, and stories that'll help you connect the dots in your practice. Today, we're going to be talking with Nicole Dahl, a marketing leader who's helped launch multiple companies onto the Incorporated 5,000 list. And now she serves as a vice president of marketing at Coro AI, where she focuses on supporting pediatric providers, families, and kids. She's also the mom of an 18-year-old son on the autism spectrum. And today, we're talking about what it was like for her to sit on the other side of the therapy room, how that experience shaped her, and what we as providers can learn from it. Welcome, Nicole Dahl. I'm so excited to talk with you today, um, mainly because you've been on both sides of the therapy world. You're a creative professional, and then you are a parent who's been navigating with your own child. And that's why I really wanted to bring you on this podcast. Besides, I love chatting with you. But I want to know what it has been like for you, what you've seen, what real inclusion feels like when a therapist treats you as a partner, and where they've really missed the mark when it's not been that case. Um, I know that every therapist cares so deeply about their clients and families, but even great therapists really struggle to make this connection. And I personally have a passion for this connection, and I have seen how it really progresses not only client outcomes, but also clinic revenue and decreases therapist buyout. So thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to share my experience with you.
Yeah. Well, first, why don't you just tell us from your real job? What do you do for that?
So I am super passionate about parent advocacy and getting parents involved in the process. So through that, it has led me where I'm currently the vice president of marketing for Coro AI, which is an amazing platform that gets parents and caregivers involved in the therapeutic process. It creates gamified interventions for kids so they actually want to practice at home, and it makes it really easy and relevant for parents as well.
I know where our team is looking at it now, and I'm impressed by what it has to offer. Let's just dive right in. And I did preface Nicole with please don't feel bad about saying something that might offend a therapist because we need to hear it. So I want to know what it was like when you felt included versus just being present.
I think when providers would come to me and say, beyond his diagnosis, what are you seeing at home? What are you struggling with? What are the biggest pain points that you deal with? And there were so many things that I thought I just kind of brushed off of, oh, that's just my son. And I
Yeah.
didn't know what was not normal or what could be made smoother by practicing either, different skills or the way I introduced different activities, working on transitions.
Mhm.
So when they actually got really practical with what I was seeing at home, and then they would say, oh, hey, you know what? Why don't you try this or go about it a different way? And would give me
Mhm.
examples and things that I could try that were relevant to my child individually instead of what just kind of felt like a pre-prescribed program of this is what we're doing with every child on the spectrum this week, but what's special and relevant to my child.
Right. And so with that, the therapist has to ask you specific questions, right? Like finding out what do you guys like to even do? And what is your time commitments? What's your life like outside of the therapy room?
We went to multiple different practices. Sometimes it was just as a matter of necessity because we would have a provider who would leave on maternity leave. And they'd say, you can go back on our wait list, which took a year to get in the first place, or you can find someplace else. And
Right.
so, we would often transition to another practice because that was the only choice. And I felt
Mhm.
helpless as a caregiver, wondering, what should I be doing or what could I be doing? I can't just not be doing anything.
Right.
So what what resource out there can I have that helps?
I talk to therapists a lot about like you've got to get buy-in from the start. And we talk about doing it from intake, right? Like you need to be getting buy-in right at the intake because what we do is so different than what other not pediatric practices, but like the medical model. Um, Tell me about a practice that really nailed the buy-in and how that felt, and maybe one where they really missed the mark. And you don't have to name these practices, but what
Yeah,
did that feel like?
I
What happened? Yeah.
Absolutely. So the first practice we ever went to, it was where he got his official diagnosis. I
Mhm.
think we waited 9 months for an evaluation and then maybe another 6 to 9 months before we got in for treatment. And that was supposed to be, a great practice in the area, which is why we went there. But then once we started with the provider, I know she was in training, but we got a student and she kind of had this cookie cutter approach, it felt like, of, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. I would go to her and say, getting ready in the morning is really a struggle because he can't get his shoes on by himself. That's a key thing because trying to been read
Mhm.
everything I could about OT. And I was like, oh, this is a skill we can work on here.
Right.
And then in the sessions, I would see them, cutting out pieces of paper and making little animals or playing with Play-Doh. And I, as a caregiver, honestly felt like she's not listening to me. I've never once
Right.
seen practice tying the shoes ever.
Right. Right.
So, as a parent, I just didn't understand what occupational therapy was. I'd never been exposed to it before. I'm coming at this with fresh eyes, but have been told this is what you need to be doing. This is what can help make life smoother. But I didn't understand anything behind it. So, I would
Yeah.
say that's the biggest piece of practices that we worked with that weren't great is they didn't take the time to, you know, even give me resources where I could then follow up on
Yeah.
my own. I've seen so many different practices over the years where sometimes providers only have 30 minutes with a child once a week. So
Yeah.
the expectation of maybe 10 minutes gets, talking with a parent. I know that's unreasonable now, but even just having, something that says, here, go and read more about what we do.
Right. Right.
Part of that reason is why I love Coro because it does that little translation
Yeah.
for care.
Yeah, for sure.
But then ones I worked with that were absolutely phenomenal is they were, those little bit longer sessions, but it really made things tangible for our everyday life.
Mhm.
And, asking me what my goals would be for my son. Do I want to be able to get out of the house in the morning with, no crying on anybody's side?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or sit down and have a meal together and then not worry, is he going to eat this because it's not one of his five safe foods or not? Getting really practical and then breaking down those steps for what can I be working on at home and to help carry it through and translate into just everyday life for us.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me if I'm hearing you right. And this is what I have in my program. And so I'm just like getting chills because just hearing it from you is like, yes, this is so meaningful and important. But
Mhm.
the therapist explaining the why behind what they're doing to connect that back to the reason you brought your child in,
Mhm.
them asking what is important to you and setting the goals around that, not what the referral says, and then
Mhm.
coaching you how to do that at home with the resources and the time and everything that you have. Does that
Yep.
sum it up?
And I mean, there were some practices where the expectation was, the caregiver just sits in the lobby while the child goes back into the room. And to me, that's, it truthfully, it just felt like, maybe a babysitting play hour.
Yeah,
And
right.
all the parents were sitting in the lobby on their phone. You could have videos going in the lobby of, here's different things you can be practicing on, or here's different tips. It was just time wasted. But once I was invited into the back across that line, that's when things really started to move and I could understand a little bit more about the why behind everything that was.
Yeah. Oh boy, I don't understand when parents are invited back in. I want to go into that just a little bit. As a parent, I know I've been on the other side of that with my daughter's like vision therapy, and I got shut out of the session, and I was like, "What?" And then they handed me this like IKEA paperwork of like directions, and I'm like, "I have no idea what you want me to do," and I'm a therapist. But like, what did that do to you? Did it make you not value therapy? Make you feel like the therapist has the power? What were your thoughts in that?
I honestly didn't value of it because I didn't
Yeah.
see, or then I would get
Right.
a, small piece of paper at the end of their session saying, today went great. We practiced pincer grasp and bilateral asymmetrical coordination. And I was like, I don't
Yeah.
know what any of that means, but I appreciate this small piece of paper. Or when I got invited into the back and I was a part of the process, like when we did food, eating therapy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
trying different foods, I could see how they were assimilating textures and tastes that he was familiar with and comfortable with, and how this progression happened. I
Hmm.
remember very vividly the first time he ever ate broccoli. I sat there and I cried in the corner
Oh,
watching because I was like, this has never happened ever.
yeah.
But just being in this session, I would get to see those small milestones from a different lens that I wasn't seeing as I was sitting out in the lobby.
Yeah.
So it really helped me appreciate what was happening behind the scenes.
Hmm. So from the clinic side, sometimes parents will cancel and it might feel like they're not putting therapy like as an important thing. They're canceling for a birthday party or this or that. What made you decide whether therapy was worth coming to or not and fitting it into your weekly schedule?
Yeah, that's a great question. So honestly, when we first got started out, we had Max was admitted to a preschool as what they called a role model child. But
Mhm.
really this preschool was 50% of children with special needs and 50% of what they call role model children. And that's how
Mhm.
part of his journey and how I discovered that he was on the spectrum is,
Mhm.
the teachers were wonderful. They had master's degrees in special education and all various modalities. So they're the ones who really impressed upon me how much of a difference this could make and that I needed to stick with it. They eventually became friends and helping guide his journey.
Yeah.
But truthfully, if I didn't have them advocating, I
Oh.
trusted them
Ugh.
and like the process. But it just, I mean, I could write a book with the story with him because there were so many
Yeah.
points where I would kind of take my foot off the gas and become disengaged just a little bit. Like when he was in kindergarten and he was getting in school OT, he would tell me, yes, I love my provider in school. It's not the same as preschool. And I just blamed it on that transition from preschool to kindergarten.
Yeah.
And, I let a few months go by, but every day it was he would kick and scream getting into the car. He didn't want to go. And then I finally was like, you know what? I need to meet with the teacher and figure out what am I missing? She was a teacher fresh out of school. This was her first year teaching, and she had him at a desk facing the wall by himself because she said that was the only way he could focus throughout the class day. And he felt isolated, he felt alone, he felt
Yeah.
like he was doing something bad just because he was a little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
And emphasizing to parents, like, your child,
You know
you
your child.
know when something's not right, and listen to that voice inside and speak
Mhm.
up. Say, you know what? Let's get more involved here.
Yeah, what I find sad is what I'm hearing is you were saying the preschool and the teachers were the ones that really encouraged you to stick with OT.
Hmm.
And because you weren't seeing why it was so valuable because the OT wasn't selling it or the
Yeah.
practitioner wasn't selling it. Oh my gosh. Did anyone ever talk to you like what would success look like in therapy for you?
I think they would say, like, in your dream world, what would that look like? But it was never tangible or what's possible.
Yeah.
Um, because he at that point, I mean, he's now 18 years old.
Mm.
So he first got diagnosed when he was 5. So at 5, would you ever even have told me that, he'd be applying for applications for college or
Right.
have a driver's license? I would say
Mhm.
absolutely not. This is nowhere
Mhm.
what's possible. And I think they were always hesitant to say, here's what maybe we could help because you don't want to
Yeah.
offer a guaranteed outcome.
Right.
But even just of here's what we think we could help with, that was never a discussion.
Yeah. And I think too, defining success, like you can be successful in therapy when you show up with questions, when you ask questions that you don't understand, when you provide us, just like for telling the parent what they can do to help the therapist understand them better too. And I feel like that's something that we don't do. We don't explain what we need from the parent. We just assume that they know.
I know. I
And you
think
don't.
first diagnosed, I think I literally got a Xeroxed sheet of paper that was like, you know, almost like, congratulations, your son has been diagnosed on the
Oh my
spectrum.
gosh.
You could tell it had been Xeroxed multiple times over and over. But I really think that there needs to be almost like an onboarding into OT, or that first appointment is really getting to know them as a whole and not
Mhm.
just that immediate, why are we being referred in?
Yeah. And that actually leads perfectly into the next part is using language. So this is part of my program is teaching providers based on what the research said from parents of like using empathetic, collaborative communication, just great language. Like, did anyone ever check in with you? Hey, Nicole, how are you doing?
They would, but it would be
Okay.
literally like the handoff as the next child was already, pulling at their
Yeah.
arm to go back and say,
Hmm.
did great today. We're heading back. How are you doing? Oh, great. Yep, good. And now we've got to go.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that just makes you feel disconnected, I'm sure.
It felt very transactional and not
Uh-huh.
a caregiver type relationship.
Hmm.
Which I understand is part of like the problem with the system is these providers are, trying to do everything they can to help every single child. And it's a lot to mentally hold, much less even, to remember, oh, that mom's name is Nicole.
It, I will argue with you. It is not a lot. It should be. It should just, I mean, it's so easy. It's in our EMR. We can take pictures. You can write it down. No, I'm just like, know the parent's name. They're a person. And what I teach is like a lot of parents are in crisis and it's hard to get out the door and they might lose their job. And just showing up to therapy has been a battle. And we need to recognize that in the parent. Like, you know what, Nicole, thank you for showing up on time every time. You guys make such an effort and it's really appreciated and it's making a big difference.
I hear from, some clinics that, these kids are having to drive an hour just to get to a provider that has availability for them.
Hmm.
So,
And then if the parent can't sit in that session, what are we doing? Right. So we see this sometimes. Like I'll ask my provider, well, does the parent understand? And, they might say, well, yeah, they nodded. Okay, well, that doesn't mean they understand. And sometimes, we can nod because we feel like, oh, I don't want to seem, ignorant for not knowing this information. But tell me about a time where you just maybe sat back and nodded and didn't admit that you didn't understand or you weren't honest about it. And like, what made you do that? And what could the provider have done differently to make you just be open and honest?
I think in the beginning, I was
Mhm.
so overwhelmed with what do I need to be doing that, obviously you don't want to seem ignorant, like you don't understand.
Right.
Um, there's just so much in that beginning. You're overwhelmed with, you're trying to read all the books that you can to educate yourself. And parents are exhausted. You're
Mhm.
trying to get through the day to day as best as you possibly can. The mental load of, did we just have a meltdown in the car trying to get here? Or were they trying to take their seatbelt off because maybe like it was touching their skin and rubbing against them and they didn't like that? So even the car ride there could seem very overwhelming. So I would even tell providers, like, even if you've told a parent something, say it over again, repeat it because you don't know what happened before they got in the door. And sometimes they need to hear things over again or hear it from a different lens where it will actually click.
I love that. Yes, because sometimes they're like, well, you said it or I gave it. And it's like,
Mhm.
yeah. How about did anyone ever teach you how to self-regulate to help your child?
There was a provider, so we were able to get in-home care at one point,
Okay.
and it helped immensely because she was coming into our home and figuring out what the routine was and where we struggle. And
Hmm.
so being able to walk through that process, that did make a huge difference. And saying, how are you? She was really the first one that even would check in with me and say, what are you doing to take care of yourself?
Yeah.
And that was very different. It shocked me and I didn't even know
Mhm.
how to answer, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
because it was very, very different from everything else we had experienced. And we had probably been going to OT for maybe 2 years at that point.
Wow. You were probably like, oh, wait, me? Well, I'm okay, but here.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're focused
Oh,
on you right now. Why are you asking me about me?
yeah. And I feel like therapy needs to start with the parent, so we can get them their systems, their co-regulation and all of that, because, that's who the child looks to and co-regulates off of. So,
Most
yeah,
first-time parents, and especially first-time parents of special needs children, we hadn't experienced that before. So we don't know what we don't know. Um,
exactly.
we don't know how to
Exactly.
frame things differently to get a better outcome.
Yeah. What do you feel like therapists really miss on when we think about like real life versus a therapy room? What do they miss and not ask you about the home?
The biggest thing for me, I think that stands out is those transitions or expectations. My son had a very hard time where I was saying, I'd ask him to pick up his toys, but it's because in his brain, he was in the midst of assembling this Lego thing and really had a hard time with mentally switching out of that task. So
Hmm.
once I learned how to frame things like, okay, we're going to play for 5 more minutes. Then we're going to put your Lego set on a mat where we can then place it here in this one space where it's safe and you don't need to worry about it. Nobody will touch it here. And then we're going to sit down and have a snack completed with applesauce or something like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But really, instead of just saying, pick up your toys and come eat, his brain couldn't connect those. That
Yeah.
to, threw him into a tizzy. But once I learned how to break things down, how he needed to hear it,
Hmm.
that was a huge, huge help. And then, I hate to say it didn't come from a therapy moment, but when the show The Good Doctor came out, the very first
Yeah.
episode that I ever saw, where it really illustrated the stimuli on a person on
Hmm.
the spectrum. That really helped it click in my brain and
Hmm.
start talking to teachers a little bit differently, going, you know
Hmm.
what? He's having a hard time in the classroom because he really can't focus because the fluorescent lights, he hears them all day, every
Yeah.
day. I'm happy to bring in floor lamps. Would you consider that?
Yeah.
And just being more aware on how your environment is impacting your child.
Hmm.
And again, I didn't know any of these things.
And
Um,
you weren't taught them by your OT.
I was not taught them by an
Ugh.
OT. That's why I said it took a few years before we found an
Yeah.
OT really asked good questions.
Hmm.
But otherwise, it was just I was managing, trying to get into a place because of wait lists and accessibility.
Right. I'm sure you were, but were you given like exercises or activities to do at home that just didn't work?
A lot of them didn't feel relevant. It felt
Okay.
cutter, like they were giving the same activity for every child on the spectrum. Or
Hmm.
sometimes we would literally be walking out of the clinic and they would take a worksheet off of a pile and say, here's your carryover work for today. So that to me wasn't really helpful. Once we had like a great provider, she would engage in like role playing conversations. I remember the first time my son, without being prompted, said, Mom, how was your day?
Oh,
That was so jarring and different that I could still very vividly remember
yeah.
it. But again, providers who look past a diagnosis or an immediate referral and figuring out what would help this family more.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Wow. How do you feel like your identity shifted as a parent going through therapy? Or did it?
Oh, absolutely, it did. Um, so much.
Yeah.
Um,
Tell me about it.
I saw it made me very sad to tell you the truth because I
Mhm.
saw the gaps in the system. and how every child isn't supported. I saw parents who were lost, who just didn't know what they could be doing or should be doing. And the education just wasn't, I felt like wasn't there as a whole. I mean, now, we have TikTok and we have so many great providers who have come out doing these little short videos. I
Mhm.
still learn stuff from them, or even other parents of children on the spectrum who share videos of, their child standing on the counter and then just sitting on top of the fridge going, does your child do this as well?
Like a sense of community, right?
Right, a sense of community. And that I felt like was really missing because, people and otherwise parents would just go in the lobby and nobody talked to each other. You would, sit several chairs in between. Nobody wanted to sit next to each other. Um,
Interesting.
but that would have been also like a great thing.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like therapy made you question your parenting?
I don't know if therapy made me question my
Okay.
parents, more of I felt inequipped. I felt like I didn't have the tools necessary, or I didn't know how to best support my child
Mm-hmm.
have, a less stressful life. I would, try and do what you considered like a typical mom thing where I would try,
Yeah.
hey, we need to eat vegetables. Hey, you
Right.
know, you're 5, you should be able to tie your shoes. Hey,
Yeah.
grandma bought this sweater for you. You should wear it.
Mhm.
Things like that those things I wish I wouldn't have done. Push things that he wasn't comfortable or wasn't ready for. I do wish I had done.
Yeah. We all do it.
Mhm.
We all do it. Yeah. Because we're just seeing, we're comparing to what everyone else is doing. And then when they're not doing it, they're like, why aren't you doing this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even, siblings and things like that. Oh, well, your sibling can do this. And, why is
Hmm.
it hard for you? Or in different environments.
Yeah.
And
And when we don't understand the reason behind the behavior, it just looks like no,
Mhm.
or I don't want to. I'm being defiant. But if we can understand environmental, sensory factors, all of those things, and I feel like that is our job as therapists to teach parents what that means.
Mhm.
Because as a parent, without that knowledge base, you are just going to see the behaviors,
Yep,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, but we've been trained in diving deep and what are the causations of that? So, yeah. Tell me about a time where you had a huge win, um, but you feel like it wasn't maybe something that the therapist saw, if that makes sense. Maybe at like a moment. Well, maybe it was when your child asked, Mom, how was your day?
Yeah, that was huge. Actually, I think come back. So it didn't also stand out to me that he didn't have close friends when he was younger. A lot of it, I would talk to the teachers or talk to the school OT. We had some great school OTs who would say, you know what, I'm going to start a friendship group and we're going to practice that back and forth conversation. So I remember the first time he got invited to a birthday party
Oh,
it was and this is probably second or third grade at this point. But just getting him to learn, like, not everybody wants to talk about sharks all day, every day, but you know, you need to, see what others like or ask conversation, how to engage in a conversation. Those were huge, huge milestones and moments for us.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So, how would you tell a therapist to be better at recognizing kind of the progress that isn't clinical necessarily? Or is it just asking questions, finding out about the family's life, right?
Just being inquisitive, I think. And
Mhm.
it sounds bad focusing on the negative side, like what's not going wrong, or what were stressors this week, or was there something that stood out in your week where you're like,
Yeah.
that was hard, or that was
Right.
rough. And then
Mhm.
even also validating like this is normal. You're not the only parent going through this, or they're not the only child who we're working on this with. This is really common. That would
Mhm.
also.
What emotional weight were you carrying that maybe wasn't visible?
Oh, so much. So much. Um,
Yeah.
he wasn't diagnosed, I felt like, till a little later on when
Right.
other receiving their diagnosis. So, and he had already had a diagnosis of ADHD. So I was like,
Okay.
how did they miss this? Or did I
Right.
answer something incorrectly
Yeah.
in the
The
beginning?
blame.
Did I, what else could we have been doing where maybe he would now be having a better time in school? Or
Hmm. Hmm.
I had spoken up sooner when he was in kindergarten, would he maybe not have had to repeat a grade? Just so much. Or, could I have been trying to encourage more social interaction?
Yeah.
We doing team sports when he was younger, and those did not go well.
Yeah. So what did you need but couldn't feel like you could ask for?
I just don't feel like there was a light at the end of the tunnel
Okay.
almost of
Hmm.
here's when it can get easier, or here's, it's
Hope.
not like a broken arm where you can say, we're going to put a cast on it and here's this defined time limit and then things will be better. It's this promise of just keep with it. And that's probably the biggest advice I would give to parents
Yeah.
is keep with it. It does make a huge difference.
Right.
Um, would not, I can say without a doubt, we would not be where we are today without occupational therapy. And my son, for his last game, now his senior year, he played water polo, which I never would have guessed stimulation wise he would
Oh,
even,
wow. Yeah.
and much less his last game, they made him captain of the team. And it was just
Hmm.
because everyone loved him so much and valued who he was as a person and what
Hmm.
he contributed to all of them.
Yeah.
And that 5-year-old version of him would not have been able to do that, especially
Right.
with occupational therapy helping him to get to that point.
Yeah. So it sounds like motivation. We need to provide the motivation and the pointing out the wins. And because it's parenting is lonely
Yeah.
for all parents at times, I think. You wonder, is it me? Am I doing the right thing? And we just need that. We need to be a cheerleader in a way to the parent to keep them engaged, bringing their child and seeing the wins. Yeah. What do you want therapists to know about parents? We have a lot of therapists that have kids of their own, but a lot that don't yet. So, what do you wish they knew?
I wish they knew we know nothing. We don't know why we're there.
Yeah.
We don't know why we got referred to you. We don't know. We probably have never even heard about occupational therapy before, period.
Yeah.
The biggest thing. And then really explaining like, what are we going to do here? What
Why are
is,
you?
what are you helping with? You're going to help with bathroom, behaviors. That seems weird, but how is this going to help?
Yeah, right. And so, to piggyback on that, so many of the younger providers, uh, it's not that they don't want the parents in the room, but they feel like they're being judged or watched, or they're afraid they're not going to be able to live up to the expectations. What would you tell that provider?
Don't worry about that at all. Granted, we are judging, but it's from a point of analyzing. We're trying to learn what
Yeah,
you're doing. Why are you doing this? Because we don't understand. I
right.
know I just came into the clinic and my child seems like they're hopped up on sugar, but I promise they're not. And now you're just going with them on a swing. How does this help?
Right, because I'm sure, and that's where the judgment is, right? Like I just paid $50 for my copay. I took an hour of PTO, and you have them on the swing. I could do that at the park.
Right. I don't understand
I don't
what
understand.
helping. And that's the biggest piece is I don't understand. Um, and the why behind everything. And it doesn't have to be this huge explanation, but even just hey, come back while we warm up. I know our gym isn't huge, but I'd love for you to stand here and just see the warm up. This is how we self-regulate and, get some wiggles out so we can focus on an activity for the next 10 minutes. And even just that short, simple explanation hits that checkbox of, oh, that's why they're doing it versus just saying, oh, I'm taking my child and they're playing on this gym inside.
Right. Because it looks like gymnastics or, the park or play school or whatever. But it's,
And they look amazing. They look so fun.
yeah.
Of course, we want to go there and play, but what is it helping and what is it addressing in our everyday lives?
Yeah. So tell me what separates good therapy from therapy that truly changes your life or your family's life.
Those who really asked about, hey, how are you doing this? Or can you give me an example of, you've mentioned that getting ready in the morning is hard. Can you walk me through step by step on what that practice, what that looks like? Or can you guys role play of how that looks in the morning? And then listening, observing, and saying, I have some great recommendations. I think this can really help. Here's what I'd like you to practice at home this week.
Mm-hmm.
That made a tremendous difference.
Did you ever have a therapist coach you in how to do something in the session? Like, hey, come on the floor. Let's go ahead and give this a try. So you felt successful before you left the session that you could do it at home?
I would love to say yes.
Oh,
I
makes me really sad. Yeah. That just fuels my passion for my program. But yeah, because wouldn't you have been like, okay, I get it. And then you work out all the kinks, every single kink. And it gives the parent the confidence to then be like, I got this. Yeah. Oh, that makes me so sad.
I never understood the large picture. Like
Yeah.
he can't handle buttons or, zippers are hard and tying shoes
Right.
are, but I never understood the mechanics or the problem behind it. Like what needed to
Oh,
be addressed to solve that.
yeah. The therapy industry is trying to move too fast because it's like productivity, but we're going to make more progress if we take 2 seconds to just say, hey, Nicole, Zipper's buttons are hard because his pincer grasp is really weak. So we need to strengthen our muscles. And we're going to do that by therapeutic weight bearing because when we weight bear, and then your brain's like boom, 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 boom. And
I
you,
can
you
play
can,
with Play-Doh every single day at home. I can do
yeah, we had Play-Doh. Oh, okay. Well, we can do some like crawling down the hallway. Your brain can figure out how to do it. Why
that.
are we missing this?
I love our founder really put it great when he says, this is the reason we need for children to be practicing relevant skills at home. It's because, if you think of a child learning to play the piano, they don't learn to play the piano in one appointment, one day a week. It takes that practice every single day at home for them to
Every
master.
single day.
And it should
Every single day. Yeah.
go through the same exact way. It
Yes.
needs to incorporate into their everyday life where it's accessible and easy for families to understand and do. So that way the child practices more and ideally progresses in their goals.
Mhm. Yes. Anything else that you want to leave with? And I know Coro is a massive thing, and I may want to have you maybe another podcast where we can just dive into Coro and you could show it because I feel like we can talk about from the parent side, but also the clinical side. It's pretty amazing.
It's huge. So we use computer vision to
Mhm.
analyze a child movements in real time. So actually by tracking over 700 data points simultaneously, and all of that information is consolidated down for the provider. So they actually get a lens into what's happening at home when the child is practicing, which to me has kind of never been before done. You send worksheets or activities home, and then you don't really know, is this being practiced?
You
Or
don't.
how long were they actually practicing or what was the child doing at home that I'm not
Hmm.
seeing in the clinic? But you can
Hmm.
put in treatment plans and goals based on a specific child. And then Cora will generate gamified interventions for them to practice that's custom specific for that child. And the great thing is it only takes like 2 minutes from the provider's end to set up.
Hmm.
So it's not this huge thing that needs to be done. It really makes it easy for providers, and then it's relevant carryover work that the parents can easily do because it's all gamified. So the children love doing it and they don't
Yeah.
mind practicing at home.
Yeah.
So little,
Amazing.
little nugget of the iceberg.
Yeah. So for therapists that are interested, they can check out Coro. It's
Coro is KORRO.ai.
And then you can do a walkthrough.
You can schedule
Awesome.
a custom walkthrough, where you may even get me on the call, or one of our other growth members, and they'll walk you through what it looks like on the back end, how it literally takes 2 minutes to set a child up in Coro for that carryover homework that's custom for them, and then
Mhm.
show you how it translates everything into insights. So you can also see like which skill exactly is a child struggling with. So,
Mm,
you have these goals and you know,
right.
achieve each goal, it may be working on 20 different skills below that. But with the computer vision, you can see exactly which skill they're struggling with the most. So you
Mhm.
can hyper target your sessions as a clinician to be exactly what that child needs in that
People need to check you out. I'll put it all in the show notes.
one.
So it's been so great to talk with you today. I really appreciate your time and just your openness and sharing your journey.
Well, thank you for bringing light to getting parents more involved in the therapeutic process. It's hugely
Awesome.
needed. And I think caregivers really benefit from saying, I know that the child is my patient or my client, but really starting to look at families as a whole and saying, how is this
Mhm.
impacting lives?
Yeah, exactly.